Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Meet the Moment Global Youth Activism event. I want to particularly welcome the students and educators joining us today. My name is Jill Tidman, and I'm the Executive Director of the Redford Center. And I would like to begin our time together by taking a moment to respectfully acknowledge and honor the people who came before us, who are with us, and the future generations to come wherever we are. In my case, I live and work on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. As a reminder, the process of colonization is ongoing and still adversely affects Indigenous people in many communities. And because we're all in different parts of the country, please use the chat to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of the lands you are on today. We do this to pay our respects to the ancestors, elders, and relatives of Indigenous communities everywhere, to affirm their sovereign rights as First Peoples, and to take responsibility for improving relations between nations. We do this to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we are and how we can each try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. This acknowledgement demonstrates a commitment to the process of working to dismantle ongoing legacies of settler colonialism and to recognize the hundreds of Indigenous nations who continue to resist, live, and uphold their sacred relations across their lands. So at the Redford Center, we use the unique power of storytelling to galvanize environmental justice and regeneration. And we know the importance and value of supporting and honoring youth voices in this work. This is the intention of our Redford Center Stories program, to provide an opportunity to showcase the insight and creativity and vision that young people have to share with the world. Redford Center Stories offers an environmental justice storytelling curriculum for grades 5 through 12, an annual filmmaking challenge, and a learning community for students and educators. Together, we examine what is happening to our Earth and to our communities, and we explore the many ways stories can inspire action and drive impact on the myriad environmental challenges we face. As many of you know, we're hosting this event against the backdrop of the 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference, also known as COP26, which is taking place in Glasgow, Scotland right now. We know, and we will discuss today, that historically at these COP events, youth voices are rarely, if ever, heard in the manner we believe they must be, which is all the more reason we need more youth engagement in this work. We need our youth to get loud, to express your visions, and to use your voices. And we're here to support you in those efforts. We see your point of view as essential to uncovering new, bold, and innovative ways to create a healthier, more just world for everyone. We have such an incredible program today. Many thanks to the extraordinary Redford Center team for creating this space for us to have the shared experience. Now I'd like to introduce you to our host and moderator for today's event, Arthi Govind. Arthi recently joined the Redford Center team and has taken the helm of the Stories program. She is a lifelong advocate for Earth protection with a background in environmental studies, music, and social justice education and advocacy. She earned her PhD in ethnomusicology from UC Berkeley in 2019, where she researched the racial and environmental justice activism efforts of several South Asian American musicians. And she's excited to further the Redford Center's mission of using storytelling to galvanize environmental justice. We are so grateful to have Arthi with us. I'm going to let her take it from here.
Thank you so much, Jill, and welcome, everyone. I'm excited to have you all here to mark the beginning of the third year of the Stories program and to converse with the inspiring young activists and filmmakers joining us today. Our event is against the backdrop of the 26th UN Climate Change Conference of the Parties, or COP26, an annual international event where world leaders meet to accelerate action toward addressing the climate crisis. Today, we will feature 3 short films and videos, all geared toward or centered on environmental crises and COP26. We're going to begin by watching all 3 of our featured films and clips in a row. And then we'll launch into a panel discussion with our filmmakers and guests. At the end, you, as the audience, will have the opportunity to ask our panelists questions by typing them into the chat on YouTube. Although we may not get to every question, we encourage your active participation. Now, I'd like to tell you a little bit about each of the films or clips you're about to watch. Our first film, Ignite, is a premiere by Eloise Sent and mentored by Pita Juarez. Ignite focuses on the positive change that we can have on global issues like climate change if we come together as a community. Our second film is a broadcast from a Glasgow climate march as part of COP TV, featuring our panelist, Meredith Ray, and other youth participating in the Scottish Youth Film Foundation's COP26 news reporting team. Finally, we will watch a clip of the full-length feature, Youth Unstoppable, by longtime climate activist and filmmaker, Slater Jewell-Kemker. You'll learn more details about our panelists after the films. And with that, let's begin with Ignite.
This is our planet. Full of natural wonders. A web of interconnected life. Yet this is also our planet. Melting to shreds of nothingness. Burning to the ground, covered in ash. And behind all this, global warming. Following the trend, this July has been declared the hottest month ever on record. But together.
Together.
We have the power to change our future for the better.
Biden signed the return of the United States in the Paris Climate Agreement.
Just like we need to be a unified nation in response to COVID-19, we need a unified national response to climate change.
Which can start with one single flame, causing a chain reaction. For good or for bad. So let's all find that flame inside of ourselves and use it to ignite the change that we want to see in the world, because it's our future and it's in our hands.
Hello, it's Zoe Conroy from COP TV reporting live from Kellingrove Park on the 24th of September. We're here for the Fridays for Future protest and we're very excited. As you can see, people are already starting to gather behind me and we're here protesting for our future and we can't wait to cover it for COP26.
System change, not climate change!
System change, not climate change!
System climate change!
But what we've achieved is we've really achieved a change in the conversation around climate.
What do we want? When do we want this?
COP26 has to achieve something. This is literally our last opportunity for a meaningful global agreement before the planet reaches its tipping point.
I think today we're really campaigning for the fact that everyone knows that climate change exists now. We did that last year, but this year it's all about showing that it's interconnected between, race, gender, sexuality, economic background, all of these things are linked, and climate change can be linked to it as well.
Obviously it's such a unique opportunity that is coming to Glasgow, which is my home city, and I really want people to take to the streets, and I want the people of Glasgow to really make a noise and take that opportunity to get world leaders to listen.
Pressure is on world leaders to agree something meaningful, but we know that change is never willingly given from above. It has to be grassroots movements across the planet who force that kind of change. We've got a really special responsibility here in Glasgow to be the ones making sure that all the world leaders here in November deliver on what the world actually needs.
I think COP26 this November will help achieve that?
I really don't know. It's anyone's guessing game at this point. I have hope, I have doubts, but hopefully we can do another big protest there and really make a difference.
When people come to those sort of protests, I think they can feel very empowered. It feels like change is actually possible.
Please get involved in organising, in activism, message a campaign that you are interested in joining, and they will be more than happy to have you. We want new people to be involved. You're so needed, so yeah, please come along and get involved in something.
We can achieve real change. We can really put the pressure on the corporate bosses, on the politicians, to implement the change that is necessary.
Fight like hell. You need to demand this change, because what we need is complete transformation.
In June 2017, President Trump announced the US would withdraw from the Paris Agreement, leaving them as the only country refusing the deal. The following year, a startling report from the IPCC warned that if we continue business as usual, we won't be able to stop runaway climate change by 2030. Scientists are sounding the alarm as the world burns. Staggering heat records with a rapidly acidifying ocean, melting glaciers, rising sea levels, stronger storms, and flooding. The world has already changed, and we can't go back to the way things were. If we stay within 1.5 degrees, we can begin to stabilize and let the planet heal, but only if we cut greenhouse gas pollution in half and nearly eliminate it by 2050. This is a monumental task that requires unprecedented changes to the way we live. It's not too late, but it will take all of us. Look how little has changed since Severn called out the UN in 1992. But instead of silently fading away, something deep inside the youth movement ignited, and the voice got louder. In Poland for COP24, I met virtually unknown Greta Thunberg, a 15-year-old climate activist from Sweden.
And the more I read about it, the more I realized no one was doing anything, nothing was happening.
I've heard the frustration that I hear in Greta's voice. I've heard it throughout all my life.
We have not come here to beg world leaders to care. You have ignored us in the past, and you will ignore us again. We have come here to let you know that change is coming, whether you like it or not.
Inspired by Greta, thousands of kids began staging massive walkouts from school every Friday. By the end of 2019, it was millions of kids and adults striking all around the world, demanding climate justice. The seeds planted by youth-led organizations for decades had started to blossom into this movement of movements on every continent.
All right, what a wonderful and appropriate set of films to watch while our leaders meet in Glasgow over the next 2 weeks to discuss the climate crisis. I am looking forward to diving into a discussion with our panelists. And with that in mind, I'd like to tell you a bit more about each of them. Our first filmmaker, Eloise Sent, is a 14-year-old youth activist from the Bay Area in San Francisco, California. She is passionate about the power that youth have in the fight for environmental justice. Eloise received highest distinction in the Redford Center Stories Challenge last year with her film, Our Future. The film we showed today, Ignite, was created with support from her mentor, Pita Juarez. Pita Juarez is a filmmaker, political communication strategist, and a queer immigrant woman from Guatemala. She has challenged traditional and political communications to include the untold stories of youth, people of color, and other communities whose voices aren't heard. Her work ranges from political advocacy to investigative journalism that has been featured in National Geographic, CNN Latino, NPR, and Univision. Pita's artistry and insight have successfully built bridges with the people on the front lines to capture authentic conversations and shift the culture of storytelling. Meredith Ray is a 17-year-old student from the Falkirk area of Scotland. She started getting interested in environmental justice when she wrote a piece for her school newspaper on climate justice and the pandemic. She also created an initiative at her school this last year called Lady Business, which aims to combat period poverty. She plans to study film and television along with politics at the University of Glasgow starting in 2022. And our final panelist, Slater Jewell-Kemker, has been making films since the age of 6. An award-winning filmmaker and climate activist, Slater has been featured in Forbes twice and selected by The Hollywood Reporter as one of 15 filmmakers under 30 to watch. Slater is an accomplished speaker and is frequently invited to speak on film and climate change panels to represent the voice of youth. She lives in a tiny house on wheels on her farm in Southern Ontario, Canada. Let's welcome our panelists. Welcome, everyone. So I have a few questions for all of you, and then we will have some time for questions from our audience as well. We've been talking about COP26. It's going on right now, and I wanted to start really by asking a question about youth. I'm wondering, what do you think the role of youth should be at global events like COP26? Slater, why don't we start with you? You have something to say.
Well, it's an interesting question when you take into consideration that young people weren't even acknowledged as an entity until 2008 at COP. They weren't allowed to be in the room or to have a say. Not saying that we've improved that much since then, but I think what really needs to be happening is what we need for not only young people, but also Indigenous communities, Global South communities. We need everyone to actually have a meaningful place at the table. We can't just have these kind of photo ops of, okay, yes, we're all here and we're going to have everyone share their voice and we've done a good job, and then go and make the big decisions behind closed doors. We need to be in those meetings as well.
Thank you. Does anyone have anything to add?
Yeah, I think just what Slater was saying, that it's really important to amplify the sort of voices that we don't usually get a chance to hear, and that so much in history we've never heard of, and now suddenly in recent years we've been able to. It's quite interesting to hear what as young people have to say.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the role of young people is often undermined by adults. So I think it's really important to take a stand and to be acknowledged and have our voices heard in these big discussions where we often aren't a part of.
So with that in mind, if you had their audience, what would you share or say to world leaders making decisions about our futures?
I think I would say that youth should be taken into account when deciding all of these decisions, that it's our future, that we will live through many more years of our life because of the decisions that they made that we weren't a part of. So to acknowledge our opinions and to really take them into consideration very carefully.
I would say, first off, that we must stay under, if at all possible, but we must attempt to curb emissions at 1.5 degrees Celsius in order to adapt and survive as a human species. We need to halt all fossil fuel production and transition to a clean energy economy where everyone is supported. And we need to, I guess, transition the conversation away from having negotiators representing national interests to remembering that we are all interconnected and we're all human and we're all part of this this extremely difficult time. I mean, I feel sometimes like what is not part of the conversation and what it needs to be brought in is this sense and the acknowledgement that this is also an existential crisis of who are we as people and who do we want to be? What is our relationship to each other and to the planet? And I think having those diverse voices present at the table is a huge step. But I think we also need to acknowledge that we need intergenerational communication and collaboration, and we need to be able to take a moment and actually be within this moment and see that we need to change everything. We can't come up with the solution for a problem when we're still living within the society that created that problem.
Really beautifully stated, Slater. Pita, what about you? What would you say to world leaders?
I think I was on mute. Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm so happy to be a part of this very youthful group. I'm feeling young today. Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that is said. You know, those closest to the problem are the closest to the solution, but are often furthest from the resources, influence, and power. So I feel like with these films, youth are saying that, whether that's showcasing a short film like Ignite, or the hunger strikes that are happening right now on Capitol Hill. And for me, I think it's really inspiring and motivational to keep doing what we're doing, because young people are just going out of their way. And it's great to see that, when I was 16, I've told Eloise this, when I was 16, 14, I was definitely not thinking about this. So it's very inspiring that people have just, created, made this their life and their life mission, because it is the future, but also just wonderful to see that this is such an important topic. And for me as a filmmaker, a storyteller, it's great to just see how other people from all over the world, which is, really great to see Meredith and Slater, how they're telling the stories from different parts of the country too.
Yeah, thank you so much. And that's a really good transition into another question that I had about film. In your experiences, what makes storytelling, and film in particular, a powerful medium for driving people to care about environmental justice?
I could jump in here. I think that filmmaking is really a unique take on storytelling, because oftentimes in my personal experience, and I know a lot of others, when you read an essay, it's not as impactful as this dramatic music and these amazing pictures and cinematography that really just all come together to create an emotion that you can kind of even feel like beating from the screen, like a pulse that's like unstoppable.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think, for example, with my film of the climate strikes in Glasgow, if I just told you, we had hundreds of thousands of people attend, you wouldn't have really been able to visualize or imagine exactly what I'd been able to see with the shots that we had, the really high angles showing you exactly the massive quantity of people that were trying to get their voices heard. Like, and Glasgow is such a diverse city, and I think that video really portrayed that and showed how just how many different opinions and walks of life were there trying to get their voices heard and be considered.
Anyone have anything else to add about storytelling and film? All right. So, one of the things that I have been thinking about a lot, and I think we think about actually quite a lot at the Redford Center, is it's really easy to feel cynicism about the climate crisis, given how slow our politicians have been in implementing solutions. And yet, as some of you have mentioned, even all over the world, there are driven people implementing creative solutions to problems in their communities, countries, and the world. And at the Redford Center, we really believe in amplifying the work of people who are on the ground doing the work right now and bringing us hope that we are capable of coming together to mitigate some of the worst impacts of the environmental crisis. What is something that gives you hope when it comes to the climate crisis?
I think, like what I was saying earlier, like there's so many people behind it. Like there's so many people striking and marching everywhere. I think it creates such a spark of hope. I think I can say this for a lot of people, that it creates so much hope that there's so many people beside you wanting the same thing. Like you're not alone in your climate anxiety and you're worrying, this feeling of like hopelessness and helplessness, that politicians aren't listening to us. Like, you're not alone in that. I think that's definitely what helps a lot.
Definitely seeing young filmmakers like you, and that there are wave after wave of young people that are joining this movement and are feeling this call to see the world and figure out how it can be a better one. I've struggled with a lot over the years, eco grief and anxiety, before it had a term for it. And when I was younger, I would feel guilty if I felt that. And I think one of the things that really inspires me is that there is this openness and vulnerability that is part of the conversation that's taking place with young people today, that we do acknowledge that we're not, and you guys seemingly acknowledge that we're not emotional robots and that this is a huge thing. But I think what gives me hope is the sense that amidst all of this, there is this sense of optimism that in order to survive and adapt, that we have to change everything, and that's incredibly exciting.
Thank you all so much. I think there is a lot to be hopeful for. I think there's a lot to be excited by. And I think the more that we can drive solutions forward that are, community oriented and community driven, I think we're going to have real movement forward. One of the things that I was wondering is, Slater in particular, you've attended numerous COP events as documented in the full-length feature of Youth Unstoppable. Do you think COP26 will be different from previous COPs? Why or why not, and how?
I've been getting asked this question a lot. I don't know. I have mixed feelings. On the one hand, it does feel like the players who are showing up and like the negotiators, civil society, young people, leaders that are at the conference, that are within the negotiations, are actually taking it seriously, seemingly. They're saying the things that we want to say, and they're listening to the right people. But at the same time, there is a part of me that is a little bit nervous and cautious, because I feel like I've been getting these strange flashbacks since COP started, and even leading up to it, of young people wanting to be heard, young people wanting to have a say in their own lives and their future, of there not being enough diversity within the conversation, that the climate crisis is getting worse, which leads me to feel like COP26 is like it is, there is still hope. There is still this possibility that it can be the conference that we need it to be, and that we can come up with ambitious legislation and policies to help us move through life on this planet that's forever changed by climate change. But at the same time, I feel like as important as COP26 is, what's more important is local organizing and movement on the ground and connecting with people within our own communities. I live within a really rural conservative area, and they don't even know what COP26 is. But I'm really excited because we're starting to have these conversations about sustainable agriculture and permaculture. And I feel like in some ways, we forget sometimes that it's just as important to connect with the people who are right around you, that not everyone knows that this is going on. I wish that they did, but I think that human to human connection is incredibly important and crucial.
Yeah, thank you so much for that perspective. And I think it's such a good reminder that it really takes kind of like both top down and bottom up approaches, right? In order to make progress on these issues. So Meredith, you are in Scotland. You are going to be at COP all next week. I am wondering, what is the energy like there right now, and what are you looking forward to most?
That's a good question. I think honestly, a lot of people are being very realistic and knowing that we might not get the answers we want or the action that what we're really hoping for this time round. But as Slater was saying, yeah, we are hearing the things we want to hear, but I think people are sort of know that we might not actually get the action, and the action to back up those words. I'm most looking forward to feeling the atmosphere like in the blue zone, and I don't know, meeting some activists that I've like followed for a while. I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of big names there that I might get to meet.
Remember to drink water and eat things throughout the day, because it can be very easy to forget these things when you're in the blue zone.
Thank you.
Beautiful reminder to care for yourself through all of this, right? So kind of thinking about storytelling, I mean, Meredith, you are going to be broadcasting from COP all week with your team at the Scottish Youth Film Foundation. I would love to talk about the process of storytelling, and this is a question for all of you. When you begin a new film or broadcast, how do you balance telling the story that you set out to tell with allowing new directions to unfold as they emerge?
I think in my experience, I've kind of just let it flow. I think I'll start out with an idea about something I want to incorporate, and then I'll keep a little bit of it, but ultimately the film will kind of just evolve into something new and different and innovative that I kind of hadn't thought of before. So just letting it grow over time and seeing where it leads is really important for me.
Yeah, I think just keep in mind, like, trying to let it be really like fluid with your ideas and just like go wherever it wants to go. I think with our projects, we are definitely trying to be the voice of the young people, and just we're trying to keep in mind what is sort of digestible for young people, and try and keep things very easy and small, and letting it be very accessible to younger people.
I want to hear what Pita has to say.
I'm just listening to you all today. Yeah, I mean, when I start a film, here's the idea. And it's happened that I wanted to do an 8-minute film and it turned into a feature-length film. And just so being open to that, because then you meet so many different characters and subjects, and then that whole thing could be its own story. And so how do I sprinkle it around of what the original idea? So I'm always open to it as long as there's funding or you have the time to do it. But yeah, I think that's also the beauty of storytelling, right? It doesn't have to be this set in stone. It could take on so many different lives if you wanted just to even do little short clips of it too. So that's always my idea going in. If it happens to change a little bit, I'm okay with that. And I think that's just like a good attitude to have towards anything.
Yeah, I think it speaks to creative processes in general that things often don't end up. I know for me as a musician, things never end up where I thought they were going to start, kind of have to be open to letting the creative process drive you, and let the people that you meet along the way kind of drive that. So Slater has read my mind. I want to go to audience questions now. We have some time for that. And there is a great question from the audience. This one is, how do you approach conversations that challenge a person's worldview?
I'd love to jump in if I could. It's so for the past 15 years, I made this feature-length documentary about young people, about climate change, about the movement, and some of my family live in Alberta because I'm based in Canada, and are associated with the tar sands industry, and are very much of a different mindset than I am when it comes to what environmentalism looks like and what success within their lives looks like. And we actually didn't speak for many years. And it took me, I think, growing up a little bit to realize that I could scream and yell as much as I wanted at them, and that they would just continue to shut off and not listen to me. And so I had to really find a way of how could I connect to them as my family, as fellow people who just also want to get through life and provide for their kids and make sure that, they are happy and healthy. And I think it's through storytelling, and it's through the power that we all today have here of being able to create film, and really finding that shared humanity, and that ability to just listen. I mean, it's weird as someone who's like, well, yes, I'm a storyteller and I'm recommending that you listen. But I think that is a huge thing, is that we've gotten so used to not listening to each other and to just be within our silos and to be communicating with people that agree with us already. One of the most interesting Q&As I've had after my film screened was in Fort Worth, Texas, again, another oil community. And it was all the kids of these like oil barons, essentially. And it became this weird, like, emotional kind of just, they didn't even know, because no one had taken the time to go up to them and talk to them, because they thought their views were already set. So I think it's important for us to remember that people don't always know what you think that they know. And that I think if you take a breath and are able to go at it with kindness and compassion, that you can really talk to the majority of people. We are all human, and we all want the best for the people that we love.
I can also add, I'm currently in Guatemala right now, and Slater was talking about how do we resonate stories, because they don't know what COP26 is, or even the term climate change that tends to be so broad, because people here are just wanting to survive. And so I think it's more about listening of what is surviving for your community every single day, right? The smog here is terrible. My mom's had a headache for a whole week. And it's just like those little things that people are so used to, because nobody's ever really taken the time to talk to them about. We talk about Indigenous communities and environmental racism. Nobody's taking the time to say, what is a life without that smog every day, or just like clean water. Just like these like little tiny things that are huge, that it's not about, I think the conference is super important. Don't get me wrong. It's great that all these leaders are meeting and hopefully they'll do something. Let's hold them accountable, right? That's why all these young people are here to do that. But I think even just like, Meredith is in Scotland and Canada, United States, and like in Central America. I think it's just like talking to your local people about what are their needs and everyday needs when it comes to the environment. And just, again, super important, listening onto like what would make their lives easier. And when we talk about more personal storytelling and listening, I think people are like super down to like make change, to do something. I was talking to indigenous people here who like organize themselves for mining and they stopped it. And I think that that's power. And that's like what I see is motivating a lot of these things that are happening, because people just, nobody's saving them, and they have to save themselves for their own communities. So I think it's just about looking at what are everyday survival needs for communities, whether it's rural, whether you're, in a place like Michigan where they still need water, or, or just all around the world. The needs are so different. The worldviews are so different too.
Yeah, I thank you so much, Pita and Slater, for those. And I think that really addresses another question that came from the audience, which is, there's a lot of focus on COP26 right now, but what happens after COP26, right? How do we keep momentum alive, and where can we channel our energy forward? And I think that, those are some of the things that you talked about, just in terms of like thinking about what are people's needs, what do people actually know about their communities, about the world, and really listening, extending compassion, extending empathy, really those like smaller conversations, those community-based conversations are such a powerful way to keep that momentum alive. Do any of you have any other thoughts on moving things forward outside of the context of COP26? Would love to hear from Eloise and Meredith if you have anything in mind at the moment.
I think holding governments accountable for the decisions that they make during the conference, if new plans are created, actually sticking to them, like the Paris Agreement, actually continuing with them and continuing to follow those plans so that we can actually achieve something more is really important.
Yeah, I'd say just keeping young people involved. I think that's really what creates such a massive drive, is having young people amplify their voices to be louder and to be heard is sort of what keeps governments held accountable.
Yeah. So believe it or not, we're running short on time already. So I want to end with one last question from the audience. What resources would you recommend for someone who is newer to climate education? So this is time for you to plug whatever you think needs plugging.
Well, I think a huge part of it is even like what you're doing here with the Redford Center. Mentorship is huge. Not any one person has all the answers. And so it's important to connect with all different kinds of people. Climate education looks different wherever you are. In some places, you can't even really say the word climate change because it's been put into law that you can't talk about climate education. But I think what's important is to even just do a quick Google search. There's so many organizations, whether it's 350.org or avaz.org or youth climate coalitions that are in your local university. In the States, Sustain Us is particularly awesome. And of course, there's this new wave of, Sunrise Movement and Fridays for Future and whatnot. But I think it's important to keep educating yourself and to keep just searching for what's happening and what's going on in the conversation right now. I think, yeah, that's the biggest thing. It's not like, hey, go to this place and you'll find something, but because there isn't just one place. There isn't one grand fountain of information for the climate crisis. It's following Indigenous people on Instagram. It's finding activists who are living through this day to day and being able to take that information, as you will.
Yeah, just keeping yourself educated and informed. And I think all those things, like what Slater said, that it can also just be as simple as reading the news and keeping yourself informed with the current affairs going on, which you can watch the news, read the news, or follow news platforms and social media, so it's always in front of you.
I think for youth especially, social media is a really interesting platform that we can use to kind of amplify our voices and to become educated. So I think just taking the time to follow like Indigenous people or climate movements like intersectional environmentalism is really important and helps us to stay educated on these kinds of topics, but also realizing that oftentimes, there's fake news that is spread, whether that's actually on the news or on social media. So being aware of that fact and working around it to try to create the best view you have that's the most accurate of the climate crisis.
Yeah, and I'll add to like one of the biggest resources for me is always going to the stories I know best and I have access to, right? And that's always like the local people that are, whether that's south of wherever I live, north or wherever I live, and just having access to those wonderful stories has always been such a great resource, and kind of just going from there. I will also say just like joining groups of people, like I'm still doing that. I just joined one this morning, like Latinos Outdoors. Just like, where you also feel like you have a space to be safe. And also just like collaboration was huge. It's something that I try to always do in all the work that I do, whether I'm just going to mentor or just produce or just, edit something. It's always great to collaborate with other people who just have the same values in terms of storytelling.
Thank you all so much. That was so wonderful. And I think I just want to add a couple of things related to all of you. I think all of you are wonderful resources. Eloise and Pita have been part of the Redford Center Stories program. If you are interested in learning more about the Stories program and our environmental justice curriculum, you can go to redfordcenter.org/stories. and sign up. It's a free curriculum available to anyone who wants it. If you would like to watch the full film of Youth Unstoppable, we're going to be posting that link as well. It should be in the chat on YouTube, so look for that. I highly recommend it. It's a wonderful film. And please do watch, go to the Scottish Youth Film Foundation's website, their COP TV platform. Meredith, along with her colleagues, are going to be broadcasting from there November 8th through 12th live and bringing you all of the news. So I think all of those are also wonderful resources to begin your journey in learning about environmental justice. So as we wrap up, I would like to take a moment to thank each of you for lending your voices today. This was amazing. I learned so much. I hope you all learned so much. And I would also like to thank the audience for joining us today, and especially our students and educators participating in our Stories program and challenge this year. So if you'd like more information on any of our panelists, COP26 and the Stories program, our final slide will have that information, including social media handles and websites. And I'm wishing you all a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much.